Statement of facts. On January 15, 1992, President Dr. Malachi and the United Hawaiian Nation acquired 476 acres of land of its indigenous ancestors, family members, and various descendants of Native American tribes of the bloodline of Hawaiians, relocating from their indigenous lands in the northern region of the Appalachian Mountains area, renamed by early Confederate settlers Sullivan County in the state of New York, where the native indigenous tribes yielded to Confederate settlement in exchange of signatures and peace treaties, land agreements for just and fair compensation, allowing them to establish their government in portions of the area that became known eventually as the state of New York. The grantor of the deed of the president to the president, Dr. Malachi York, Chief Black Eagle, and the United Hawaiian Nation was Orange C.H. Larson and Sandra Gay Layson, and acquired property out of the indigenous lands of Native Americans, historically known as Altamaha, in the southern region of what is now called the state of Georgia. Thus, in their right to self-determination and their right to develop in accordance with their own needs and interests, the United Hawaiian Nation began to build and reestablish their social structures, educational systems, and cultural values that establish their ethnic identities and distinctiveness as a people, while having the right to autonomy and self-governing in matters relating to their internal and local affairs, with intentions of being free from this discrimination of all kinds. The Declaration of Sovereignty of the land and the people of the United Hawaiian Nation came into force on June 26, 1992, which was when your declaration, Constitution, was accepted. This when it was drafted. It was drafted by our president and accepted by Hawaiians worldwide June 26, 1992, as it states right here. And it warns other governments, which we'll get into. With the gathering of indigenous tribes, the Yamasee tribes, the Native American Seminoles, Creek, Shoshone, Wichita, Mound Builders, who on that date agreed to revitalize their cultural traditions, customs, while engaging in their traditional cultural gatherings, the United Hawaiian Nation acknowledged and accepted the drafting of their Constitution and maintained their unanimous vote of the selection of their president, His Excellency, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, known and traditionally named Miku, Chief Black Eagle. The United Hawaiian Nation began improving their economic and social conditions by improving their economical institutions and educational facilities. Discriminatory attacks by local law officials of the United States began approximately 5 years later, in 1998. Local officials and self-appointed building inspectors, SEALs and those guys, working in the United States governmental capacities, began placing injunctions of cease and desist orders. Further development, asserting themselves jurisdiction by their local city ordinances as a means to stifle their need to develop in accordance with their aspirations. And the exercising of the rights of the United Hawaiian Nation, the threat of discrimination had begun with the plot of local authorities of the state of Georgia on the basis of an allegation by a disgruntled exiled tribal member reporting to the United States authorized officer, Howard Richard Seals, through the communication of a letter alleging criminal activities. The United States unilaterally attributing to themselves jurisdiction as a result of their investigation and warrant issued by the United States Federal Bureau, the arrest of President Dr. Malachi York. On May 8, 2002, approximately 3 p.m. U.S. time in Milledgeville, GA, the President of the United Hawaiian Nation was traveling with his governmental personnel, including his wife, Kathy Johnson, when his vehicle, while parked in a public parking lot, was ambushed by 20 agents authorized by the United States Department of its Federal Bureau of Investigators and taken control of. These agents, using the element of surprise, broke windows, drew guns, aiming their weapons at the heads of the occupants of the vehicle, and for reasons unknown at the time. President Dr. Malachi York informed the agents of his sovereignty and international protection and diplomatic immunity that is attached to his office and the absence of the jurisdiction authorizing this arrest. Simultaneously, approximately 60 miles away, which is documented as the largest in U.S. history, a parallel raid and ambush involving over 300 agents from various authorized agencies of the United States invaded and raided 476 acres of the indigenous sovereign land of the United Doosua Nation, called by its tribal families, indigenous people, and thousands of Nuwaubians, called by thousands of Nuwaubians worldwide, the Holy Land of Wahani, known by many traditional names, such as the Holy City of Kodesh, the Golden City, Tamaret, home of the headquarters of the United Nuwaubian Nation worldwide. Detained, the agents subdued 300 families, including children ranging from infancy to early teen, expecting mothers and tribal members. Tribal elders, religious temples and buildings were raided with excessive use of force, including tear gas, explosives, detaining and forcing children to sit unattended for hours without food, water, or shelter from the intense heat of the sun, causing severe suffering and mental trauma. That's illegal in international law. You can't transfer or force indigenous children from their land. You can't do that. The only way that the United States can repair that is through reparations. These agents acting in an official capacity use the threat of violence and death with the use of bodily harm as a form of intimidation against women, children, and men, using military helicopters. I don't know if y'all remember that. Military helicopters in the sky, armed vehicles, freezer trucks. Who remembers the freezer trucks? Did y'all know they brought freezer trucks and body bags on the land? Did you know that the master explained that these were reptilian beings that invaded the land? They brought body bags up there, freezer trucks. Freezer trucks and body bags with the if you bring body bags, what do you expect? Casualties. Seizing and controlling the governmental buildings, religious facilities, schools, temples of learning, religious sites, restaurants, entertainment halls, cultural museums and spiritual centers, warehouses, farms, storage silos, music recording studios, the president's family's house and music and vehicles, while alleging to possess a warrant of search authorized by the United States to take control of the United Nuwaubian Nation's land, searching for evidence of alleged crimes purported to have been committed by the President Dr. Malachi York of the United Nuwaubian Nation on the premises of indigenous sovereign land outside of the scope of the jurisdiction of the United States. In the detainment of President, this is important here. These next few paragraphs. In the detainment of the President, Dr. Malachi York, his torturous abuse began immediately while being in the custody of federal agents of the United States, being deprived of proper food and water for days, causing severe suffering. The President has suffered and is currently suffering tremendously for the lack of medical attention needed to treat symptoms of acquired angioedema, a life-threatening blood condition that causes the swelling of vital tissues in the throat and mouth, causing asphyxiation. Who knew that? You know that's what happens? From the stress of being detained, the angioedema flares up and it causes his throat to swell, and he's passed out several times with an hour between COs coming to the cell to see what's going on with him. That's torture. Being housed in a facility with convicted murderers and criminals sentenced to life terms and death sentences, being labeled by the penal system of the United States as the highest level of threat to society, heightening his risk of injury. Why? Okay? Possible death and harm due to the criminal allegations. presumptions of guilt attached to the President, Dr. Malachi York. He has been locked down in solitary confinement 24 hours a day without human contact and interaction, being abused randomly for the exercising of his right to his religious preference. The United States failed and is failing to take effective administrative measures to prevent these acts of torture, including beatings, extreme temperature tortures. You know what I mean by extreme temperature tortures? In the winter, they turn the heat all the way up. In the winter, they turn it all the way down. In the summer, they turn the heat all the way up. In the summer, they turn the heat all the way to the air, not heat. They use the different temperature torches, extreme, one extreme to the next. 1 minute he's hot, 1 minute he's cold. Sleep deprivation, physical bondage by wrist. Did you know he's being bound by his wrists and his ankles? Being brought into the cell, they purposely squeeze his wrist with these, the federal custody, they have these boxes, you put the handcuffs in, and then they put a box over it so they can't have access to the locks of the handcuffs. And the more you put pressure on the box, the tighter it gets around your wrist. So they walk him into the visiting room, and with scars on his wrist and blood from the pressure coming out of his ankles. Physical bondage by wrist, feet, and head causing injury to his body. Forcible removal of teeth as a form of punishment for religious affiliation. They told him to deny the Wapu. I don't know if you remember that or heard of it. They constantly come to him, telling him in order to be, there's different levels in federal prison where certain inmates who are housed at the highest level of security, they're allowed to go to lower programs, which loosens the security. But according to that prison, because he hasn't denied Uwapu, then they still are keeping him in the highest level of security. In fact, they even said, the reason why we're not going to lower you is because you are the head of the Nuwaubian nation. Now they actually documented that he was the head of state. How foolish. All of it is going to come right now. These acts have been committed by various official personnel, prison facilities that he has been transferred to over the last 10 years of his torturous, illegal, and inhumane incarceration. These torturous acts committed against Dr. Malachi York has been documented and witnessed by official personnel, citizens of the United States, and members of the United Nuwaubian Nation from his kidnapping on May 8, 2002 until the present date of the admittance of this enclosed application. On January 24, 2003, a Middle District Court presided by Judge Lawson, it was evident that the United States' such purpose of inflicting severe pain and punishment on the person of the President, Dr. Malachi York, was effective in their intentions by the fact of a guilty plea taken by him under duress as stated by President Dr. Malachi York on record on June 30th, 2003 in the United States Middle District of the state of Georgia. In the above-mentioned district, a hearing with Judge Lawson presided, Representatives Max Woods, Richard Moultrie for the government of the United States, and stated defendant, President, His Excellency, Dr. Malachi York, misnomer the White York, accompanied by representatives of the government of the United Nuwaubian Nation, nationals, tribal elders, and family members convened for the purpose of the rejection by the court of the illegal obtained guilty plea by the presiding judge, Lawson. The President of the United Nuwaubian Nation stated, for the record, and on his own accord with sufficient notice and communication to the government of the United States, of his indigenous sovereign status and membership of a sovereign nation, which was first stated in this proceeding by Attorney Ed Garland. Now, what is this saying? On record, he laid it out for them. I don't know whoever had access to those transcripts. The transcript was attached where that portion of the transcript was attached to this application, where he went down the line of who he was.